Good morning, Mr. Zarif. Thank you very much to give us an opportunity to be with you in Euronews.
Good to be with you.
Thank you very much. Actually, I want to start our interview with your last negotiations with the European Union's country, especially after the withdrawal of the United States from the JCPOA. You had new rounds of negotiations, but it seems that you are not happy with the process of the negotiations with the European Union. Could you tell us something more about it?
Well, we've had two rounds, one at the ministerial level, two rounds, one immediately after President Trump's announcement, when we met with the three European ministers and the High Representative in Brussels. And then about 10 days ago, when we had a meeting with the ministers of all JCPOA participants, that is 5 minus 1 plus 1, or E3 plus 2 in Vienna. In both meetings, I saw a clear commitment on the part of both EU countries as well as Russia and China to maintain the nuclear accord, to maintain the deal, to ensure, as they say, that Iran would continue to benefit economically from the deal, as well as other benefits that we are entitled to in the deal, including cooperation in the field of nuclear energy. There are some more specific proposals, in addition to the general political commitment. Some specific proposals, including some banking channels, some proposals on oil, some proposals on the cooperation between our small and medium-sized enterprises, which are all positive. But what we need to see is to see the implementation of these proposals. We all know that the United States is planning to continue to push the international community through bullying, basically, and at times through blackmail. And it is for the international community, particularly the European Union.
But President Rouhani mentioned, I think 2 weeks ago, that the proposal of the European Union is not satisfying for us.
It is not satisfactory because it does not have the necessary details of the actual plans to implement these proposals. The proposals are basically general commitments or a perspective on what they expect to do, but how they are going to do it, because we see that under pressure from the United States, under the psychological atmosphere that the United States has tried to create, some European companies have already started to withdraw. And that has to be confronted by the Europeans if they are indeed interested in preserving the deal. Everybody believes that this deal is important for international peace and security. This is an important achievement of diplomacy. So if that is the belief, if that is the appreciation of our partners in Europe, then they have to be prepared to invest for it. Iran should not be the only side in this deal that has been investing in sustaining the deal, in continuing to the implementation of the deal. Others need to go beyond political statements and political commitments and take actions, as we have taken actions. We have taken actions since the very beginning, since July 14th, in implementing this deal. And then since the implementation day, we have continued to take actions, and our actions have been verified. It is important to have in mind that there is a body that is verifying Iranian actions. It's not just my claim that we have remained committed and we have fulfilled our obligations under the nuclear deal. It is the IAEA that is saying that. But unfortunately, if you go to any European bank, if you go to any European big company, they will all tell you that the other side has been prevented from implementing their part of the bargain. The Americans have prevented, and the Europeans have been prevented from implementing their side of the bargain.
But do you believe that they can do something more than this? Because as you consider truly, lots of the European companies are working with the European government, and European also they have some European owner. How European unions and European countries can resolve this problem?
Well, it is a decision with far-reaching implications, not just the fact that they have to invest if they believe that JCPOA is an important international instrument, but if they believe that they can, in fact, continue to live with a global system, a new global system in which one country will make the final decision and everybody else will have to follow. And sometimes you feel that it's not even one country, it's an individual or a group of individuals who are making decisions on their own personal interest or for their own personal interest, and then expect everybody else to follow. Now you see, particularly after the meeting yesterday between President Trump and President Putin, that there are voices of concern in the United States that President Trump is not necessarily pursuing American national interest. Now, even if he were pursuing American national interest, is Europe prepared to accept US national interest to dominate the decision-making process in global economy? Are they prepared to accept this? Or are they prepared to stand against this? This is a question that the European companies need to ask themselves, that the European governments need to ask themselves. And then there are various possibilities for cooperation. You don't need only the countries. I mean, Europe is not only companies that have American shareholders. There are many European companies. Many of them have no exposure in the United States. Many of them have no dealings with the United States. But the psychological atmosphere needs to be changed, and I believe the governments in Europe have a major part to play in changing this psychological atmosphere so that European companies will decide to continue to be in Iran. Iran can live without them. But if they want to maintain this achievement of diplomacy in which Europe played an important part, then they have to invest in it.
You and also President Rouhani mentioned different time about the European guarantee to our Iran financial issues should be considered. Could you explain us more, and what is exactly, which kind of guarantee do you need?
Well, I believe what is important for now is that Europeans put mechanisms in place. That is the guarantee. We will ensure ourselves that Europe will stay committed to these commitments. We have means of our own to ensure that. What we need from the Europeans is both the political commitment, which they have made, they have expressed their commitment. Now we need to see the measures in place on the ground, not simply in writing, not simply in words, not simply in general political commitments, but on the ground, in the banking sector, in the investment sector, in the energy sector, in the transportation sector, in the SME sector. These are all areas where we need to see action being taken. That is, we need to see banks opening accounts. We need to see SMEs coming to Iran, engaging with their partners in the private sector, and so on and so forth.
Do you think that this process will happen? Because at the first, President Rouhani, especially just after the President Trump statement about the withdrawal of the JCPOA, President Rouhani said that we don't have lots of time, just we have several weeks. But now we passed maybe several months, and I read something in the news that maybe European Union wants to propose you a new package in November.
Not really. We have moved forward in the timetable that we presented. We received some assurances in the beginning, even before the few weeks that President Rouhani had mentioned, and then we received a package that was not satisfactory. Now, we are working with the Europeans. Work is on the way as we speak between my colleagues in various government departments as well as the private sector and their European counterparts, so that we test the possibility. Iran has said very clearly that we have a right, and we stated this in the meeting of E3+2, that we have a right to respond to the US violations of JCPOA. That right is there. We have reserved that right, and that right remains Iran's right. But we are not interested, that is not in our interest, that is not in the interest of the international community to hurry in exercising that right. That does not mean we have abandoned that right. We have given Europe some time. We have seen a political commitment on the part of Europe. We have seen some technical measures put on the ground. But as President Rouhani has said very clearly, and as I have repeated it to my colleagues, these are not enough. There are two very specific time frames. One is the time frame of the first batch of US sanctions that will be in place in August, and the other time frame is the second batch of US sanctions, which will be in place in November. And we will see how Europe is dealing with that, and we will respond accordingly. And we have a very specific plan that we have shared with some that we will respond if those measures are not appropriate and sufficient.
You addressed about the political decision that European unions and also European companies should take about the future of them. I want to ask a question. What do you think about the European unions? Are they stronger in comparison before, or they are weaker?
Well, I think the EU is going through challenging times. But Europe in general and the EU in particular have possibilities, have potentials. They have a very large economy. They have influence in greater parts of the world. And I believe generally Europe is underestimating its power and its influence. We believe that it should be more active in regional peace and security, in international peace and security, as well as in promoting greater cooperation and dialogue. I think EU represents multilateralism and dialogue and peaceful settlement of disputes, whereas the current trend in the United States is exactly the reverse. And that is why I believe right now is an extremely important crossroad, both for Europe as well as for the international community, whether it wants to go through multilateralism, rule of law, or whether it wants to submit to unilateralism and pressure and bullying by individuals.
One of the biggest criticisms that your opponent, especially in Iran, mentioned is about your negotiations, the process of the negotiations that you did in the Iran nuclear deal. They said you didn't take a great and strong guarantee from the United States side, especially about the banking sanctions. And also, I saw a video that when the chairman said that the Iranian couldn't recognize the meaning of the lift because they think that it means end, but indeed it means suspend.
Well, with all due respect, Secretary Sherman may have a very good command of English, but she's not a lawyer, and she doesn't know the meaning of lifting in UN terminology. If you look at all UN resolutions, lifting in the UN resolutions means removal of sanctions. And that is the word that the United Nations terminology uses. That's exactly the term of the art in talking about removing sanctions. If she misunderstood it because of her lack of knowledge of UN practice and Security Council practice, because I think her area of specialty is social welfare, then she can have a meaning of the word in English when used in her area of specialty, but in legal terms, its meaning is very clear. As far as the guarantees are concerned, JCPOA has limitations on what everybody wanted. It does not include everything that we wanted. It does not include everything that the United States wanted. But at the end of the day, I think everybody believes that it's a balanced text. It represents the requirements of Iran, particularly what constituted our priorities, which were our rights to have peaceful nuclear technology for peaceful purposes, in which we received unprecedented assurances, including recognition of our enrichment program. I do not believe that a single other country has received recognition of its enrichment program in a Security Council resolution, not even permanent members of the Security Council. So those are areas that are important for us. The United States had a number of commitments, important commitments, which it decided to violate. Now, if somebody violates the law, is it the problem with the law, or is it a problem with the behavior of that individual? The United States has withdrawn from the Paris Accord. The United States has withdrawn from Trans-Pacific Partnership. The United States has withdrawn from NAFTA. Would anybody come and say that these instruments had deficiencies? Or would they say that the United States simply committed a violation of the law? If somebody goes through a red light, is it a problem with the color of the light? Or is it a problem with the fact of somebody being lawless? So that is what you need to concentrate on. Of course, in politics, people say a lot of things in order both to justify themselves and to criticize their opponents. And that's all fine. But when we sit down and want to look at the realities, first of all, when we talk about lifting, we need to look at the terminology that is used in law, in the United Nations, and not in social welfare.
Okay, I want to pass about this subject. Let's concentrate about the Middle East issues. In 16th of July, President Putin and President Trump had a meeting in the Helsinki in Finland about the different ideas. But as we follow the news, they had some kind of agreement between them about what's happening in Syria. Are you concerned about it or not?
No, I think at the end of the day, the situation in Syria will be determined by the Syrian people. I think the Syrian people have been able to stand up against a lot of pressure, a lot of carnage by terrorists and extremists, and that has gone for 7 years. Iran and Russia have helped the Syrian people and will continue to help the Syrian people as long as it's necessary. But at the end of the day, it is the Syrians who make the decision. We have good communication and coordination with Russia and with the Syrian government, and we will continue to do so. Our objective here is very clear. That is our objective, the objective of the Russian Federation, and that is to fight against terrorism and extremism. And I think had it not been for the resistance of the Syrian people and the support they received from their friends, today we would not have had this current situation where ISIS has been isolated. It's not removed from the scene in Syria, but it has suffered serious defeat. Nusra and other terrorist organizations have suffered serious defeats. And that is because of these realities. Now, if President Trump wants to take credit for it, he should take credit for supporting Daesh, which has been what the United States and his allies have been doing all along. He admitted it himself during I saw him yesterday saying that Iran should not benefit from our efforts to defeat Daesh. I think he is reading history in a very convoluted manner. The fact that U.S. arms, U.S. weapons have been found in the hands of ISIS and other extremist organizations is documented by Western sources. So I think we should look at the realities. Those who fought terrorism, those who fought extremism are Syrian people, and those who worked with the Syrian people.
But you are not concerned about the changing the policy of the Russia in the Syria, especially after, because we saw in a few weeks ago that Prime Minister Netanyahu traveled different times to Moscow, and they had lots of meetings with each other about changing the situation in Syria.
Well, I think Netanyahu is trying to divert attention from his domestic difficulties, as well as from the fact that he has been suppressing the Palestinians, massacring them en masse, enjoying basically the blind support of President Trump, even in moving the embassy to Jerusalem, which was condemned almost by the entirety of the international community. So these are the facts on the ground, and he is trying to use whatever smokescreen that he can in order to divert attention from that. And he's been doing a lot of PR work and a lot of basically propaganda activity, and we've seen that, and we've been seeing that for the past, I don't know, 20-some years I've been following this. And he hasn't even changed his tactic. He hasn't improved his tactics. Same lies, same cartoonish approaches, and he continues to do that. And I mean, that's to his discredit. But the fact of the matter is, our goal in Syria and the goals of Russia in Syria are rather clear. We are there to fight extremism and terrorism along with the Syrian people, and we have made important achievements with the Syrian people in this regard.
Exactly the same day that Prime Minister Netanyahu was in Russia, foreign policy advisor of the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ali Akbar Velayati, was there. There is a question that how do you recognize the responsibility in the Middle East? Where is the foreign minister? Where is for example, General Qasem Soleimani and also Mr. Velayati?
Well, there has been a lot of speculation about that. First of all, the timing of the visit was a pure accidental coincidence that the timing was such. I think the timing was arranged by President Putin based on his schedule. Secondly, Dr. Velayati was asked by the Foreign Ministry to visit a number of countries, as were others. The former Foreign Minister, Dr. Kharrazi, was also asked to visit a number of European countries. He went to Spain, to Italy, to Portugal. Other former and current officials, including ministers, were asked to deliver President Rouhani's messages to various countries in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America. This was a part of a diplomatic package that Foreign Ministry devised in order to use and to ask important personalities to travel to various countries in order to deliver the message of President Rouhani. In the case of Dr. Velayati, since he is the special advisor to the leader, he also, as a matter of courtesy, took a message, an oral message from the Supreme Leader to President Putin. People have tried to create a story that is bigger than what it actually is. This was all within a package that was devised by the Foreign Ministry in order to do this. I've been doing my own travels to China, to Russia, to Europe, to India, to South Africa, to the region, and I will continue to do that. Whenever I need, I will ask my friends and colleagues in the cabinet as well as outside the cabinet to help me in that endeavor. I think that is common in the international community, that we use important personalities. But that also shows that not only we do not have a divided foreign policy, but we have a unified foreign policy where everybody stands on the same lines, on the same principles, and are following the same procedures and the same policies that the President and the Foreign Ministry design.
You didn't answer about the General Qasem Soleimani.
General Soleimani also has a certain mandate, and he follows that mandate, and that is all within the general framework of Iran's foreign policy that is being pursued by the country in various fields.
And how was the result of the meeting between Mr. President Putin and Dr. Velayati, because we saw some news, especially from the energy minister of the Russia, that said we are ready to give goods to the Iranian people instead of buying oil.
I usually do not go into the details of diplomatic meetings, because diplomatic meetings are supposed to be held in private. These are private conversations that people decide to continue. Otherwise, people would engage in negotiations through television. If they wanted to state what was said in the meeting, then they would not need to basically travel so far. They could make the statement on television, and the other side could respond. But I think what I've read, I've read the transcript of Dr. Velayati's meeting with President Putin and with other senior officials of the Russian Federation. And I see in those meetings basically a continuation of the line that we have been following. A number of issues that were raised in those meetings were issues that were raised in my own meeting with President Putin in Sochi, in President Rouhani's meeting with President Putin in China on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, and in other meetings. These are parts of a bigger package of Iran-Russia cooperation, which includes a lot of activities, investments by Russia in Iranian energy sector, participation of Russia in Iranian infrastructure activities, engagements between Iran and Russia in oil and trade. This is a big package of cooperation that we have with Russia, but I do not believe that a part of that package is we give oil to Russia and we receive goods and commodities. It's a much bigger package, and it includes a lot of other variables, including possibilities for energy cooperation between Iran and Russia, possibilities for Iran to purchase products from Russia, not necessarily Russian, but also possibilities for Iran to receive cash in terms of its energy relations. So this is a big package of cooperation between Iran and Russia, as a good partner for Iran, continues to be engaged. So I think there is some truth in all of the statements that were made, but none of those statements are representative of the entire package.
But I think that the Iranian society are not so, they don't have a positive view about the cooperation between Iran and Russia, especially after some quotes like this, that the energy minister of Russia said this. But I want to ask you, what is your perspective about the cooperation with Russia, especially with the lots of works that, for example, Israel side wants to do, that wants to make distance between Iran and Russia?
Well, I think Iran, as the leader said a couple of days ago when he met with the cabinet, wants to expand its relations with everybody, East and West. He was very clear that with the exception of the United States and the Zionist regime, we want to expand cooperation with everybody. So that is our general policy. This government came to office based on the policy of constructive engagement, and that remains the premise of our foreign policy. However, there are countries which have stood with Iran during difficult times. Russia and China are among them, but there are also others like India, like certain other countries in the neighborhood, and we will continue to respect those who have been working with Iran during difficult times, and we will continue to have relations with them. Secondly, Russia is our neighbor. We have differences, we have different areas of cooperation in the Caspian, economic cooperation, military cooperation, security cooperation, regional cooperation. China is our biggest trading partner and also a very close friend of Iran. We have comprehensive strategic relations with China. But we want to have good relations with Europe too. That is why we have insisted on a comprehensive, balanced global relations. It's not looking to the east, not looking to the west, but having a balanced general relationship with the entire international community, with very few exceptions.
Iran, different times, said that the finishing the JCPOA and removing this deal can have great and dangerous consequences for the security of the region. Could you explain us more about this?
Well, more than Iran, this is the point that Europe makes. Because they believe that JCPOA is an important non-proliferation document, and without JCPOA, there is room for much greater tension in the region. We, on our side, believe that we have always relied for our security on our people. Our security is driven from within, not from outside. And for that reason, we do not consider some of these instruments as security instruments necessarily. JCPOA was for us an important diplomatic achievement in order to end what we consider to be an unnecessary crisis. But for others, it may have different meanings. And that is why we believe, those who believe that this diplomatic achievement was a very important security achievement, they should invest in it. They should not simply make political statements, but they should invest in it practically.
Yes, I'm going to finish it. You didn't answer to this question exactly. I want to know these consequences can be goes to a conflict, a real conflict, military conflict between Iran and Israel?
No, we're not looking for any military conflict with anybody. Iran has not threatened to use force, neither has it used force against anybody in the past, 250 years. That is a very clear history of Iran. But we have also shown that our people will resist aggression. We will not accept anybody to try to intimidate Iran, to humiliate Iran, or worse yet, to invade Iran or to undermine our security or territorial integrity. That has been a very clear message that we have sent not through our words, but through our action. We have come to the assistance of everybody who was under threat in the region. So our friends and neighbors in the region have always felt that they do not receive any threats from Iran. Some may have made some propaganda in order to advance certain domestic or regional agenda, and have not gained much from it. You remember they did that with supporting Iraq against Iran, and it didn't provide them with a lot of comfort in the days later and the years later. So I believe the best way to deal with these issues for our Persian Gulf region is through regional dialogue, and that would ensure the security of everybody in this immediate neighborhood.
I want to ask you the last question. It's a light question, actually. What do you think about giving the immigration to the Afghani people who are living in Iran? For example, do you agree that, for example, maybe in next FIFA World Cup we will have some Afghani nation people that having the Iranian citizenship and playing in our football national team?
Well, we have some Afghans who receive Iranian citizenship. The numbers are not great. Our citizenship regulations legally have been very difficult for decades, going back to the early 1900s. That's where our citizenship laws were originally drafted. But we now have close to 3 million Afghans in Iran. We have close to 400,000 Afghan students going to school in Iran, receiving all the Afghans who live in Iran, live with the rest of the population, use the subsidies that we provide for transportation, for health, for certain food commodities that everybody use. So I think we have been very hospitable to our Afghani neighbors, as well as to others who have been in Iran, one of the largest refugee populations in the world, in a consistent manner. For the past 40 years, 37, 38 years, has been Iran. We there is not even a single year when we did not have something in the neighborhood of 3 million refugees in Iran, and that will continue. Of course, we believe that Europe and others should engage in burden sharing, because otherwise these refugees could end up elsewhere if we did not accept the burden, which I think Europe is now finding out with much lesser numbers of refugees. So I think it would be important for them to take a look.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zarif, for having an
Thank
interview
you.
with Euronews.